Recent data from the SWIFT system shows that the share of payments in US dollars has risen rather than fallen, and is now at an all-time high of over 46%. That is to say, within the SWIFT system, the proportion of settlements in US dollars almost exceeds the sum of all other currencies. The euro, the world's second-largest currency, the share of the overall trend in the last year instead of rising, has now almost fallen below the 30% mark. Worst of all, the euro, which once wanted to challenge the dollar's position, now finds itself farther and farther away from the dollar. Once again, the US has resorted to its usual tactic of specifically targeting the number 2 position that poses the greatest threat to the US. Since the euro has threatened the status of the dollar, the United States, of course, to liquidate, but this time it is not a conspiracy but a conspiracy. The euro was established to now just 20 years, but the achievements are surprising. In fact, in the 80s and 90s, European countries have increasingly understand that, with the dollar hegemony continues to strengthen, if you can only use the dollar in trade, it is necessary to pay a very large amount of dollar tax to the United States. The best way is to completely abandon the dollar in trade, but if the global scope of going to the dollar obviously cannot do, for Europe, the establishment of the Eurozone, and in the internal use of a unified euro for trade, is a feasible way. After a lot of hard work, Europe finally carried the pressure of the United States, launched its own unified currency, the euro. As the economies of the European countries are not bad, the overall level of more ranked in the top 3 at the time, within the countries each other's trade volume is also very large. When the countries are gradually give up their respective currencies, the unified use of the euro immediately showed a strong offensive. Soon the euro became the world's payments ranked number 2, the share gained from the US dollar back in the hands. Another data also shows that the euro threat to the dollar. 20 years ago the dollar in the central bank of the reserve ratio compared with the present more than 20 percentage points, and the euro's current reserve ratio is exactly 20%. The United States reduced 20 points, the euro grew from 0 to 20, and again from the hands of the US dollar to take the share. The dollar certainly can't be taken lightly for this kind of situation. A few years ago the UK left the European Union, meaning that the UK, which had kept its own currency, the pound, ended up simply giving up its Eurozone status. This is not just a contradiction between the UK and the euro, there is very clearly a dollar figure behind it. Successfully let the United Kingdom leave the Eurozone, means that this move went through. The future of the United States may also want to find ways to divide the Eurozone. But the bigger move is only from last year, that is, the use of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict broke out, the US quickly promote the SWIFT system to keep Russia out of the door. Since there is a lot of trade between Russia and Europe, and almost all of it is settled in euros, after this one sanction started, these trade using euros for settlement, suddenly disappeared, that is to say, should have used the euro now do not exist. We look back at the SWIFT system every month published data will find that it is after that, the euro's share of payments continue to decline, the United States of America's share continues to increase. While shouting about sanctioning Russia, the US plot is to secretly sanction the euro. The US is playing a series of punches, while using at least 2 other aspects. On the one hand, it keeps raising the interest rate of the dollar, which in turn raises the exchange rate of the dollar and suppresses the exchange rate of the euro. The euro is becoming more and more worthless, and the probability of using the euro and reserving euros will of course become lower and lower. On the other hand, the US keeps exporting inflation to Europe, and when inflation in the US starts to fall, Europe remains at a high level. This has led to many companies in Europe having to choose to move into the US in order to minimize the effects of inflation and the energy crisis. This led to another large amount of trade no longer being settled in euros. But this does not mean that the United States has all the benefits. In fact, if we only look at the data of the SWIFT system, we can also see the impact of global de-dollarization. Although the proportion of the dollar has increased, but this is limited to this one settlement system. Since countries like Russia and Iran were kicked out of this system, trade involving these countries is not counted. What is more important is that Russia has used its own case to show the world that trade will not be affected without the use of the dollar, and that oil and natural gas will still be exported, and food will still be a commodity in demand. Russia's economy, after a period of sluggishness, is now experiencing positive growth. The current forecast is for at least 2% growth for the whole year, and growth in the second quarter of this year has increased from 3% to 5%. Unemployment in Russia is now the lowest in recent years, and inflation is now much lower than in a number of major European countries. Everyone suddenly realized that not using the dollar turned out to be such a great benefit. So the Asian Clearing Organization held a meeting and decided to start using a new settlement system internally instead of the SWIFT system. The BRICS countries also held a summit to discuss the further internal use of local currency for trade, and gradually establish a new settlement system to replace the SWIFT system. China's CIPS system has been in mature operation for many years, connecting more and more countries and banks, and showing the advantage of gradual substitution. In this case, the share of the dollar has increased in the SWIFT system but decreased globally.